Yeah. So, any questions from your discussions or from your thinking over lunch? Any questions? Questions?
From the conversation we had over lunch,
Yeah.
what I understood, I don't know if I'm right, that's why
Sure.
I'm having it, is the intention behind what you do, whether it's to defend your dog. Somebody has a dog that attacks other dogs, or you call a lawyer or whatever. Or whether you take somebody to court, it's the intention. If it's revenge, then you build karma. And if it's to save, let's say, other women from being kicked, then it's a good intention.
Well, okay, let's look at that really clearly, and let's look at that. There's obviously degrees, isn't there? So intention, or the word even better is motivation. Because intention, bare bones intention, is the actual action. I will kill the mouse. I will go to court. I will defend my dog. Then beneath that, informing it is your reason, if you like, your motivation for why you're doing it. That's what you're asking, yeah, isn't it? So then, you can see there's anything from the most intense rage and hatred to do something to complete compassion, isn't it? But it's so many variations of it. So yes, of course, the main, in general, in the understanding of how we literally create karma, how we program our mind, it's fairly, even the example of when they're killing the mouse. Paros could have real compassion for that mouse, and he truly believes killing it will help it, yeah? He's got compassion, hasn't he? There's real compassion, and I've got real anger towards the mouse. It's obvious that motivation is the one that makes all the difference in terms of the karmic impression you leave in your mind. We both intended to kill. We both actually killed the mouse, but his reason was to help and my reason was to harm. So that's the piece. The motivation is the key. Of course, it doesn't mean you should go around wanting to kill people because he means well. No, don't back off, because there's not enough wisdom. But it's really clear, yes, the way, the process of how we program our mind is what's in the mind, the wish. So generally speaking, then we could say, the usual thing in the world, I've got compassion for this dog, so I will, sometimes I will, to defend the dog, I will harm the person who's about to defend my dog, to hurt my dog, wouldn't it be? Well, that isn't really that good. That's the reason most people have war. You have a compassion for this group, but you have anger for that group. All the terrorists would say that. All the holy wars they talk about, these Christians way back in the Middle Ages when they ran around slaughtering all the Arabs, that was their motivation. So that's not really good enough. That's why the Nazis killed there, and the Americans killed the Nazis, and why everybody goes around. You have a group over here whom you have compassion for, and then usually you have a group over here who seem to be doing the harm, whom you get angry with,
But it's different harming the other person. Let's say you have another person that has a dog that attacks dogs in general.
That's right.
And you tell the other person, have your dog on a leash. They refuse. The next day, the same thing. They refuse. The next day you tell them, if my dog is getting attacked again, I'm going to call, I've already talked to lawyers, and I'm going to sue you. And the place that you work.
Yeah, okay, mainly this reason. Okay, that type of motivation.
It's not that you're going to
harm the person. No, I know.
There is other people who get another dog and harm their dog as a revenge.
I understand. No.
But you have to put your borders.
Yes, you do. But still, even that action, you see, this is where the motivation there sounds okay, but it's mainly attachment. You don't care. You don't tell other people to put their dogs on a leash if they're harming other dogs. It's only because they're harming your dog. That's sort of my point.
Or the dogs that are around.
Well, maybe, but much of the time it is compassion, but it's mainly pushed by attachment.
Yes.
Because you understand my point. It's better than nothing, but it's not really that good. It's better than nothing, but still it's mainly propelled by attachment.
It's the same. You wouldn't put the pedophile in your house if you have children. You wouldn't put the pedophile in your house, for example.
You wouldn't what?
The guy that loves children, that rapes children, in your house if you have children.
No, of course not.
In
some
way we have to put the...
No, listen, I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is, if we look into our minds carefully, we read every day about people who harm children, let's say, and we're shocked and horrified. But we don't do anything about it until they harm our children. We read about people who abuse dogs and do this and murder, but it's only usually we start to act, when it comes to ours, which is what I'm saying is it's better than nothing, but it's usually because of attachment to my friend, my house, my property. That's much of the problem.
So that's not good.
Well, no, it's not a question of not good. It's a question of just, if we're looking here, the Buddha's taking this view that we can develop our compassion and love to limitless degrees to include every single sentient being, to go way beyond just to be compassionate for our own objects of attachment. That's all. It's a question of degree. Everything's degree. That's all. It's a degree, you know, how much compassion you have. And usually, you see my point? No. Okay. I understand. If you think of the spectrum, all the way from here, we're ordinary, deluded, sentient beings. Full of delusion, full of anger, full of rage, who go around harming and killing and lying and stealing to get my wishes fulfilled. That's the extreme level of a really deluded person. And then it's gradually degrees. Then you get to a person who's still got attachment and anger, which is normal for the world, but then they're going to be having some more kind qualities. And they mightn't go around harming, but they will have compassion and love, but only for their beloved dog, only for their beloved children. So then that's better than nothing. That's much better than the previous person. But you can go, all I'm saying is Buddha says we can go even more than that, and we can learn to develop love and compassion for every single sentient being. We will still go around defending, of course we will, but we won't want to harm anybody. Not just. It's a question of degree of love, of levels of compassion that we can cultivate.
So if somebody has a high compassion and has children and dog, what would they do with the pedophile and what?
You do whatever's appropriate. But you'd have compassion for the pedophile. That's the point. You see, right now, the only way we interpret compassion is it's for beloveds. So we think of compassion as sweet and soft. The idea in that use of the word, to think that you could have compassion for the pedophile doesn't make any sense. What do you mean compassion? He's evil. So all I'm saying is we have the capacity to develop also compassion, not only for the child, who is my child, but even for the pedophile who harms my child. But the action you would do, would you put the pedophile in prison and you'd help your child. You'd do whatever appropriate. So even the reason you'd put them in prison is compassion. That's the point I'm saying. You'd even kill them if you had wisdom. You'd even kill them, but with compassion for them.
Oh, so again we go to the motivation. The motivation why you would...
That's what I'm saying. It always has to be compassion for everybody. Even compassion for the person who harmed your dog. It would have to be compassion, even for the person who harmed your dog.
Compassion put him to jail, let's say.
What?
If he harmed your child.
No, I mean, if that's appropriate. All I'm getting at is you grow and grow. In this compassion wing, we grow and grow our compassion to include every single sentient being, based upon understanding karma, which is why they do it, and based upon with immense compassion for them, so you do whatever's appropriate. If a little child is hurt, you'd pick her up and hug her. If a man goes around beating a child, you will protect the child and you'll put the guy in prison. But the compassion is for both of them, equally. That's what I'm trying to say. Of course, it's high level. We've got to go there slowly. Do you understand my point? That's why you can forgive somebody. You know, because you understand why they did it. But put them in prison, of course, because they've got to be protected from themselves and others. And you'd have the wisdom to know what would be the best thing to do. This is the wisdom part. I mean, we're talking really big here. We're talking, but this is where we can go eventually, you know, long term. Do you understand my point? You'd use reasonable, the world's way of dealing with things. Compassion doesn't mean all sentimental and nice, or the poor thing can't help it. That's not compassion, that's stupidity. Do you understand? Compassion can be really tough. That would be the reason, but God, slowly, this is intense, you know. Yeah.
To complete something about that, let's say that we are witnessing a scene of a violence, not something in the media, but in front of us, somebody.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And they're both strangers, not us.
Yes, of course. I understand.
We feel compassion for both of them.
Of course.
So what we can do?
You use your common sense.
Okay.
In whatever the situation is, wisdom. Okay, in whatever situation you see, if you're trying to train yourself in this way of thinking, you'd have compassion. You'd see the suffering they're both causing each other and themselves, and then you would do whatever you can. And often we can see there's nothing we can do. Two people having a fight, let's say, and you try to intervene, they'll tell you to go away and mind your own business so they can carry on with their fight. Even a woman being abused by the husband will get annoyed at you instead of leave him alone. So we can see compassion is recognizing the harm that people do to each other because of their own delusions. Your heart breaking. But then if the wisdom will tell you, whatever wisdom you've got, is there something I can do? If there is, then do it. If there's not, then what can you do? I mean, if you can go to Iran tomorrow or wherever it is tomorrow and stop all the wars, if you can go tomorrow to Israel and sort out the Palestinians and the Israelis and have them love each other, then honey, go right now, I'll pay your airfare.
Me too.
But we can see. We can see. Often people's stuff between each other is so intense. And of course, this is the karmic history between people. It goes on and on and on for probably 1,000 lives, way before they were Jews or bloody Arabs, you know, excuse me. This is the point, it's just the shape they've got this life. And you've got this intention, this power between each other. You know what anger's like, it's so intense. You're going to find an enemy if you've got anger. And then, you know, and this is what's so funny about it. Remember one Tibetan monk, he said how ridiculous anger is, because, you know, whether it's a war or fight between two people, the anger drives you to each other. You're raging and harming, and then eventually you get exhausted, and then you have to bring the peacemakers in. He said, well, why not start with the peacemakers? But anger has to exhaust itself first, and it can be countless lives before it exhausts itself. That's the tragedy. So if we can do something, and this is where courage comes in, we can't make it all go away. So we've got to see it for what it is, understand the causes, and of course Buddha would say from countless lifetimes, build up an energy. It just won't disappear in overnight, you know. So learn from it first of all yourself and realise, oh my God, look at the power of anger. I don't want that. That's your wisdom side. Then if there is something to do, please do it. If not, the Buddhist approach is then long term, you do what you can, individuals one at a time, and then you continue to motivate. This is where this motivation comes in very powerfully. You continue to motivate that I will continue to work on myself no matter how many lives it takes, so I can become a perfected being, become a Buddha, so I'll never stop benefiting others, life after life after life. It's like your long-term goal, you know. Because you can't make it all go away. That's the tragedy. Because people create their own stuff. You know, this is the part that's so awful, so painful.
So part of the highest, like working in an orphanage or working for helping others, is the highest for the Buddhist? Or
Say a bit more.
Helping others meaning like there's a situation, I don't know, they're killing dolphins in Japan. You go to help the dolphins, or you become part of saving whales, or working in an orphanage. Yes. Is that the highest degree for a
Not
Buddhist?
necessarily, no. I mean, it is a pretty big one. Doing anything that's kind to help suffering beings is pretty incredible. It's an amazing way to live our life. But also giving advice sometimes is pretty powerful. Giving people advice how to change their minds, that's really powerful. Like, you know, I think of people I helped in prison. I couldn't change their situation one fraction. I couldn't open the prison doors. I couldn't get them lawyers. I couldn't give them money. But I gave them spiritual advice that helped them deal with their situation, and therefore they could help others in turn. So it looks more quiet way of helping, but it's a very powerful way to help. To give people advice how to deal with their suffering and their nightmares, you know. That's pretty intense. That's pretty marvellous, if we can. You understand? Yeah? Yes.
I was thinking about the answer you gave me before, and I realized that I don't really know what you mean by saying ethic. I mean...
Ethics.
Yes, I mean, I know what is Western ethics.
How would you consider ethics? What do you think ethics means?
Well, you know, being Jewish, Christian, originated ethics for us, it's, you know, the Ten Commandments, basically.
That's right, which is God's instructions.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. I discussed this yesterday, but let's look a bit again more deeply here. Because we have the view of a creator, and we know that God made the universe, and God made the laws of morality, and then God listed his instructions of what to do. And that's what I mentioned when I spoke to a Jesuit priest, you know these Catholic priests, a priest friend, and I said, tell me by definition what a sin is.
Yes.
And he said it's going against God's will. So in other words, what defines a sin, meaning unethical, is doing what God said not to do.
Yes.
And then that means you have to ask God to forgive you. Would you agree? You have to ask God to forgive you, don't you? That's what you do if you're a sinner. God has to forgive you for being bad, and you try to be good now.
Well, if I was an Orthodox Jew or Orthodox Christian,
that's what I'm talking about.
Sin it this way, yes.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But I wonder what is your...
I'm about to tell you. So I'm comparing it with that one. And that, I think, is the typical view we have. Even if we're not religious, the world says, don't do this. There are laws, aren't there? Don't do this, don't do that, don't kill, don't lie. The world says that, isn't it? The world says that, doesn't it? The non-Christian
Not
Jews...
necessarily, no, it doesn't.
It does. It's got laws in a country. Law says don't kill. If you kill, you go to prison. Law
right.
says...
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Okay.
Doesn't it? Materialist people have these laws.
Yes.
Communists have laws.
Yes.
You agree?
They do, yes.
That's my point. So listen to... But you look at... It's the same philosophy. If you do this, you'll get punished. Isn't that true?
Yes.
So that's the same principle, except it's not God who punishes you, it's the state who punishes you. Would you agree?
Yes.
So what I'm getting at is this. The usual view we have of what ethics is instructions from somebody up there somewhere telling us what to do. That's why if you're a naughty boy in a country that says don't kill, and you kill, and if no one notices that you killed, you will think, great, I got away with it. Won't you?
Yes.
So that's naive level of ethics, Buddha says.
Okay.
What he is saying is ethics, good ethics and bad ethics, it's a natural law. You don't need to be seen to be naughty, or you don't need to be seen to be good. The very doing of killing by you causes you, it harms another, that's the definition of a bad thing, an action that harms another. But when you do it, and this is the point about karma, you harm yourself. You don't need anyone to see that you killed. So the Buddhist view of ethics is it's a natural law that killing, lying, stealing, harming others is a negative action. But when we do that action, because of our wish to harm, we then pollute ourselves and we will create the cause for our future suffering similar to that. So ethics in Buddhism is the same principle, don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, but the definition of it is profoundly different. You don't look like you're following me.
No, I didn't follow the profoundly different. I don't understand exactly what you mean by profoundly
Okay.
different. Where is it different?
Okay. Do you accept that the usual view, whether it's Christian or Jewish or worldly, there's a series of instruction that somebody has written that I'm supposed to follow? Do you accept that?
Yes, coming to the idea that Ten Commandments were written by someone, yes.
But they came from God. We are supposed to hang. And so if you do one of those things, that's a sin, isn't it?
It's a sin because you
because you did what God said you shouldn't do.
Yes.
And then what happens is God will punish you. Do you accept that's how it is in that view?
In this view, yes.
Okay. So now in your mummy's house, mummy says don't do that. And she's not there. And you do it, but you think, oh great, mummy didn't see me do it. That's okay, I got away with it. Do you understand that concept?
Yes.
So therefore you didn't get punished. Do you accept that point?
Yes.
So the dualistic view, what I'm pointing out is, there's this, Buddha would suggest it's a dualistic view of punishment, of morality, which is based on the idea that someone up there somewhere, God, the state, mummy, daddy, the judge, they list a bunch of instructions and they tell you to do them.
God in you and will punish you, or you get away with it if you're lucky. Yes, okay, but
I'm trying to explain it to you. You just have, do other people understand what I'm saying? Okay, so I will explain it to you. I'm trying to explain the difference in principle of what defines an action as negative. If you're a Jew or a Christian or a good person, a son of your mummy, a good action is one that mummy or God says you should do. And you're a good boy and you will get praised. And if you're a naughty boy, you will get punished by someone else.
Yeah.
Do you accept that?
Yes.
Okay, the Buddha's view is different. He says, the same as Jesus, the same as the Ten Commandments, killing is wrong. The reason, if you're a Jew, is because God said so.
Yes.
But the Buddha says the reason has got nothing to do with Buddha saying so. He's just a messenger. He is a person who has observed that if you kill, he's observed that it's a negative action because it harms others. That's what defines it as a negative action, not the fact that God said not to do it. Can you hear that point?
Yes.
But it doesn't make any, it's not ringing any bells in your head. You don't get the point. Huh? Answer me. Do you understand the difference? First there, do you understand the difference?
Yes, I do.
So, for example, the Buddha's view of ethics and morality is more like the view that if you go to your doctor, she will tell you not to smoke. Why? Why will she tell you not to smoke? Why?
Because you may harm yourself if you do smoke.
Precisely! She doesn't tell you to smoke because she says so, does she? She doesn't say to you, I want you to not smoke, and you'll say why, and she won't say, because I say so. Will she? She won't say that, will she?
Probably not.
That's right, that would be stupid, wouldn't it?
Yes.
That's the view we have of morality. It's something that someone else said we should do. You can have that view if you want to. The Buddhist is more like the doctor. The doctor is a messenger who, from her own experience, has seen that smoking cigarettes will cause you suffering. So she advises you, for your sake, not to smoke. Buddha's the same. He advises you not to kill for your sake. Nothing to do with the fact that he tells you. So if you kill, he says, because it is an action that harms another, that's what makes it negative. But when you do it, it causes you suffering.
So harming other is
Huh?
So harming other is non-ethical.
Who?
Hurting other is non-ethical.
Hurting what?
Others. Hurting others is non-ethical because you're hurting yourself.
No, first point, hurting another is unethical because it hurts them. That's what defines it as unethical.
Mm-hmm.
It's defined as an action that harms another. But what Buddha has found to be so is that when you kill, and when you lie, and when you steal, because of your anger and your attachment, you pollute yourself, you harm yourself. This is the fundamental meaning of karma. Therefore, you put seeds in your mind that will ripen in the future as your suffering similar to that. That's the Buddha's view of morality, and why he would suggest it's not cool to do it. It's for your sake to stop you suffering. And a virtuous action is one that will benefit another, not because he says so. It's a natural thing, it's a natural law. And when you do virtue, you purify your mind and you create virtuous seeds in your mind that will just naturally ripen in the future as your happiness. So what I'm getting at is the Christian and Jewish teaching is God is the boss and says don't do this because he says so. And if you're naughty, he'll punish you. And if you're good, he'll reward you. The Buddhist one is our own actions themselves will reward us. Our own actions themselves will punish us. We don't need somebody up there to run the show. That's the difference in Buddhism.
But that leaves us a lot to self-interpretation. What is?
No, it does not.
Other.
No, it doesn't. You listen to what he says. And you hear it and you see if it's logical. And then if it is, you buy into it.
Does it go into detail, like except do not kill anyone? It's go like, like...
Sweetheart!
Do not steal, do not sleep with other men's wives, etc., etc. Does it go into detail, or leave it to your interpretation?
Sweetheart, he can do it's nothing to do with that. You're just a natural Jew. You're a natural Christian. He just has the view of a creator. He just has how he talks. It's his philosophy. You can tell. Not being rude. You're allowed to have. You assume a boss. You want a boss.
No, I don't.
Well, it sounds like the way you talk. You assume it. What if Buddha is a person who's got some discovery about suffering and happiness? What do you mean he leaves it to me? It's nothing to do with him leaving it to you. You're the boss anyway.
It left to me to interpret it.
Sweetheart, God Almighty, never mind, let it be. I'm arguing with you too much.
I'm not arguing with you.
I'm arguing. It's okay. It's called debate and it's good. I'm arguing to clarify points. That's what I'm trying to do here.
Fantastic. Well,
Sweetheart.
Yes.
God Almighty. If a doctor
Yes.
is a messenger, she's learned from her experience that cancer will harm you, that cigarettes will harm you. Do you get me? Then you're sort of asking me, does she interpret what causes cancer, or does she leave it for me to decide? That's a stupid question. You wouldn't ask that.
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't, would you? You'd know it's science, yeah? Well, this is science.
But when she will tell me to get in diet.
What?
But if she will tell me to go in diet, I might reconsider.
That's fine, that's okay, but what I'm getting at, the fundamental point I'm making here, the Buddhist approach is not one of a superior being instructing people to do something because he's the creator.
Yes.
It's a person who has found from his own experience, which every word I'm saying in this room is the findings of this person called Buddha. He says you created yourself. You don't need a creator. You are the one who brings consequences to you. Your virtuous actions will bring happiness to you, he says. Your negative actions will bring suffering to you, he says. So that's his view. So if you're interested in it, like the science of it, you look into it. It's up to you to decide if you live according to what he says and then find the truth of it yourself. That's the point. Do you see? Are we communicating a bit better now?
We're trying.
I mean, are you understanding my points a bit better?
I understand.
Good, okay. I mean, you don't have to believe a single word I'm telling you. I'm trying to get you to hear them, then you can decide for yourself whether you want to follow Buddha or Lenin. I don't mind. It's your call. Are we communicating, people?
Yes.
This is the meaning of karma, So I keep saying it's not moralistic. But it's so embedded in our mind. This idea of good girl, bad girl, punishment and reward. It's very deep inside us. You understand, isn't it? This dualistic view of punishment and reward. That's not relevant in Buddhism. There's no one up there to punish or reward. We punish ourselves and we reward ourselves, you know. Yes?
Unfortunately, for me, maybe, I feel that Buddhism is similar to punishment and reward.
Who's punishing? No, okay, good. Stop. No, stop right there. So then who is doing the punishing? That's the question. Who doesn't say punishment, doesn't that imply a person deciding and then imposing punishment, a person rewarding? That's the key point. Don't go past there. So who is doing the punishing?
The thread of Buddhism. The thread.
No. Who is the person doing the punishing? The person has to punish. It can't be just theoretical. Who is in this theory, who is the person doing the punishing?
Well, could be anyone or anything.
No, darling. If the Buddhist view, I understand what you're saying, it sounds similar, but then you have to point out, in Christianity it's easy, it's God. In my household it's easy, it's my mother. In the country it's easy, it's the police. So if we're taking this view that I create my own experiences, Buddha's just simply pointing it out, that I create my experiences, and that a negative action, if I look into the definition of it and I decide to buy into Buddha's explanation of it, then he is saying that that action will produce my suffering and that my virtue will produce my happiness. So where's the punishment and reward there? What you're suggesting is, I think, that a good result coming from a good action is like reward.
Yeah.
But a reward implies a person doing it. You would never say that about if you eat healthy food, it brings you a healthy body. You wouldn't call that reward. You'd call it science, wouldn't you? Would you agree with that?
No, I think the other way.
Which way, darling?
The first way. That
Which is that?
I don't think it's science at all. I think it's...
Which one's not science? Sorry.
Okay, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know, but I
Yeah.
feel that if I eat lettuce, it feels good and it's going to make me feel good.
No, you don't just feel it. You have to prove it, don't you? You can't just feel it. Oh, I see. You don't have to prove it. I see. You don't have to prove that food brings you health.
No, I can feel it.
So you don't have to prove it.
No.
Oh, I see. That's fascinating. No, are you really serious?
I'm deadly serious, and this is my problem with karma. I love Buddhism, but I do not feel the principle, the philosophy behind karma. I can't, because of the punishment and reward.
But there's no punishment. I mean, you can think what you like. I don't mind. That's fine, darling. I understand. You can decide however you wish. It's okay. Like I said,
That's why I enjoy this debate that you've had, because it raises something in my question mark of the Buddhism.
I understand, darling. Perfect. You can look into it and see for yourself, or you can just decide that. I don't mind. Whatever you like, it's okay. I understand your point exactly, Melanie. Thank you. Yes.
No, the difference, as I understand it, in this point, in Buddhist, you call it consequence or a cause and effect, where in another religion you say reward or punishment.
That's fine.
This is where it comes the difference. But in both cases, an action has a result. Either comes as a result of an effect.
Yeah, of course. Either way, whichever. Of course.
Yeah.
Either way.
So
Sure.
it's more like definition.
Well, of course it is. It's got to just find it and then decides.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
It's
But
a
it comes
cause
to,
and effect.
of course. But it's the same. All I'm saying is about I keep saying scientific, because if you do go to a doctor, and she's wise about health, and I know nothing about health, she would have scientific findings. Not like Melanie, who doesn't think you need to have science. You just have to go by your feelings. That's amazing. There you go. She lives her life like that. But that they've discovered that smoking cigarettes could cause cancer in your lungs, isn't it? And she'll show you the movie of all the hideous lungs and show you, my God, Robina, if you keep smoking, and this I think is the point, if you go to, a Christian priest, I'm not criticizing it, I'm just looking at it, observing, and he goes, if you do this, you'll go to hell. Now we know what that means is God, because God made the universe, God is the boss, God is to be rewarded, therefore you committed a sin, and God will punish you by sending you to hell. Mummy will say the same to me. If you don't do this, you go to your bedroom. The doctor, though, will say, if you smoke, Robina, it itself will cause you cancer. That's the difference, and that's, for me, quite a profound difference. You don't have to... He doesn't think. Well, he's like Melanie.
There is a probability. We all the time.
Oh, darling, no, I know. That's not the point here. That's not the
There
point.
is a point.
That's not the point,
But the
darling.
cause and effect, it's like.
It's not the point, sweetheart. That's not the point I'm
making.
making. It's not the point I'm making. So clearly, it's not very relevant to you guys, so let's change the subject. It's okay. Do what you like with all this. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Can I?
Yes, go.
For years I had this issue with karma
Yeah.
kind of like fear with the
Yes,
word
exactly.
karma. It's like
Because we're
something
used to
very
the dualistic view of being a naughty girl and getting punished. That's why.
I want to, and until I read in a book of Diana Cooper, which is for angels,
Yes.
and she said in just half a paragraph, there were two people in Sai Baba, one on a wheelchair and the other one, his mother, taking the wheelchair.
Yes.
And they were giving notes, and if the Sai Baba takes your note, then your wish is complete.
I understand.
And the student of Sai Baba walking next to him said, why aren't you taking his note? He's in a wheelchair. Why are you helping this lady to get married?
That's
something
right.
really stupid and something not serious.
I understand.
And he said in his last life, he was, I don't know, something very important in the war.
I
He said,
understand.
and he killed many, many people.
I understand.
And his mother was his right
I understand.
hand. So if I do that,
Yeah.
now in this life, being a cripple and his mother, their hearts are being opened to receive love and to give love.
Yes, I understand.
And through this process, it's something really good that's
I understand.
happening inside of them.
I understand.
And if I stop that now, I'm stopping their karma
Yes, I understand.
for the opening of the heart so
I
they could
understand.
not kill again.
I understand.
I don't know if it's the Buddhist way of
No, I
karma,
can hear it.
but-
Sounds very. I understand your point. Yeah.
And
Great.
for me, that
Very
really
nice.
changed. It's
I understand.
like these people, they might have killed 10,000 people. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean they're going to be killed 10,000 times. It
I
means
see.
that they're going to go through something
I see.
for them to feel love and
Yes.
receive and
I
open
understand.
love. And after that, they won't be able to kill again.
I understand. I see you. That sounds very nice. I don't know if that's right. That's okay.
It's a question as well. So you don't.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, well, let me think. I'm trying to think about it. I don't know. One of the Buddhist ways would certainly say there can be good coming out of the suffering. That's for sure. That's what I'm sounding from this. Like my friends in prison, it's been their wake-up call, helping them develop their hearts. You know, the suffering which is the result of past,
So
but
after
they're
that,
able
they
to
won't
use
be
it.
able to harm again.
Huh?
So after that, they won't.
No,
their next
no,
life
not
harm
necessarily. It
again.
depends on what they do with it, isn't it? That's one of the aspects of karma. But like the one I'm talking here is. Anyway, yeah, sounds good. Nothing wrong. What else, people? Any questions that came up? Yes. Brad.
I just remembered before, as we were talking now, the debate was going on.
Yes.
And we were talking also about this is the main question, what is the Buddhist approach
Yes.
to handle anything?
Yes.
And I remember this story that was told to me by a witness of a scene in New Delhi, downtown, rush hour.
Yeah.
It was the traffic lights, and there was a lady in the Ford Taunus, and her car had stalled. And the lights turned green, and behind her was a taxi driver. And he was on the horn as soon as the lights turned green. And he kept honking, and there was nothing she could do. So at some point he gets out of the car, and he's really irate. And he goes over and he yanks the door, and she looks at him and she smiles and she said, "Thank you," she said. She gets out of the car, she said, "My car has stalled. I can't do anything. Please, you try so we can get out of this situation quickly. And don't worry," she said, "I'll go to your taxi and I'll honk the horn."
That's a nice story.
Yes, I think that would be a nice Buddhistic approach.
Right.
A win-win situation with a twist of humor and a little bit of...
Exactly, I know. Exactly. It's very nice. I like that, yes. Very good. So, okay, the bottom line for the Buddhist view of karma, the essence of this approach that I'm taking, is that Buddha is saying we're responsible for our own happiness and own suffering. That it's not punishment and not reward, that it's not the getting of good things or bad things, that we literally are our own creators. This is the point. This is really, in a sense, my way of saying it. That every millisecond of happiness we have, every millisecond, our being born human, our having good tendencies, our having good experiences, having loving husbands, having nice children, having money in the bank, everything that's good that facilitates our life, that ideally we would use then to continue to develop our marvellous qualities, this is the fruit of phenomenal virtue in the past, phenomenal virtue. That goodness brings happiness, and negativity brings terrible, terrible, terrible suffering. And as I said, it has got zero to do with punishment because no one's doing it to you. We all know, in other words, another simple way to put it is everything we think and do and say has its own consequences, which we understand in the world very well. We know if you put a seed in the ground and you give a bit of water and a bit of sun, you'll get a flower. That's not punishment or reward, it's a natural law. If you smoke cigarettes, it'll affect your lungs and it could bring cancer. That's not punishment, that's a natural law. You put this together with that and you'll get that. This is what I'm trying to say here. It's not a question of somebody deciding that you will get a rose, or not someone deciding you'll get cancer. There's no up there person deciding it. It's a natural law itself. My mum, who was a Catholic, she used to say, virtue has its own rewards. In a sense, that's like saying the meaning of karma, you know. So yes, and I would suggest, forgive me Melanie, I would suggest or whoever's hearing it this way, that the initial hearing of it, it's because already we have a view deep in our mind of the dualistic view of punishment and reward. It's the default view we all have. Then it sounds like another variation of that. It sounds like it. The good, suffering comes from bad and happiness comes from good. But I would suggest, you know, this is my way of observing it, my way of using it and working with it all these years in my own life, that I'm seeing what is bringing in me a sense of accountability, stopping blaming other people, stopping guilt, stopping anger, stopping resentment, stopping bitterness, stopping feeling like a victim, realising I am the one who set myself up for whatever happiness and suffering I've got, so I am the one who's in charge of bringing myself the future results. At the simple level first, I want happiness and don't want suffering, fundamental. Then with growing myself, I can then see others that are exactly the same, so that I can grow compassion for others who want happiness and don't want suffering. This for me is the way of framing the philosophy of karma and how I try to see how I bring it into my daily practice. Which doesn't mean other views can't also bring. I'm just talking about the Buddhist view, that's all. The one that I'm buying into, if you like, and using every day and learning to experience and attempt to verify for myself. This is what I'm trying to say. This is my own experience. Using this view that I'm responsible for the good and the bad causes less anger, less fear, less jealousy, less blame, less depression, less all the other dramas. This is my own experience. And so if I understand the philosophy and the psychology, but if I from my own experience, I can articulate that in terms of how the philosophy and the psychology works, these models, you know. That's just from my experience. That for me is the teaching in it, that I'm the boss. I'm not the product of someone else's handiwork. That everything is cause and effect. Everything is cause and effect. And we understand it brilliantly in our amazing universe. We're geniuses at it in the physical world. That's why we can get 100-story buildings every time. That's why we can get amazing vegetables and amazing things, because we understand the laws of botany, the laws of mathematics, the laws of engineering, the laws of architecture. Well, all I'm suggesting here is Buddha's expertise is the laws of happiness and suffering when it comes to the mind, which is what the law of karma refers to, what your mind does every day. Another way of saying it is what Buddha's suggesting is, what Buddha's saying is that what your mind does is the boss. All your thought, every millisecond of every thought. That's what, quote-unquote, does karma. Karma refers to what the mind does every minute. And the Buddha's finding is that what's called negative, which is anger and fear and neurosis and jealousy, actions propelled by them can only bring suffering to you, only bring nightmares, short and long term. And that actions propelled by compassion and empathy and love and joy and all the rest can only produce happiness, short term and long term. That's another way of putting Buddha's view of ethics and morality.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Can we say that maybe the reason that makes us time to think that karma or somebody that punishes can be the same? Maybe the reason is because we don't have control over it. Let's say, if my karma has it for me to have the tendencies to kill, and I cannot change it right now, then it's like somebody that's punishing me.
Well, I know, but it's not. Your own past habit. If you've been playing the piano for 20 years wrongly,
Yes.
your habit of playing it wrongly is the reason you find it hard to play right.
Absolutely.
So it's like that. There's no one doing it to you. That's a superstition, saying someone's doing it to you.
Maybe.
It feels like we're powerless. You mean the feeling of powerlessness? Absolutely. Now that's very true. That's a good point. But to think that someone else is doing it, someone else is making you play wrongly, is just superstitious.
No. But because sometimes we cannot say something very fast, let's say.
No, of course not. Of course we can't.
So we think that we're powerless. So if we're powerless...
Yeah, that part's fine, but but where you said someone's doing it to us is just plain not the point. But of course powerless, of course. But that's pretty me. He said, well, if your garden, if you haven't done any weeding for 20 years, it's going to take time to pull out all the weeds and, isn't it? Of course, same thing. But once you understand the logic of it, what a weed is and what a flower is, then you persevere and you know you'll get the result eventually. And you'll learn from it and you'll pull out your weeds every day from now on because you don't want to have the suffering. So that's how you learn from it, not see it as something that's imposed upon you. The way the Buddha talks about ego is this instinctive sense that I'm this victim who got plonked on this earth by somebody else who causes me happiness and causes me suffering. That view is the one the Buddha says causes so much intense suffering, that we feel like everything is done to us, which is what produces happiness, attachment, and what produces anger. That's, you understand. So yes, of course, what you're saying, but if you think it through, it doesn't, it doesn't come to that. If you think it through, you learn from it, your experience. Okay, what's the learning here? I better pull out the weeds every day. That's all. That's the learning, and then you're empowered, rather than feeling someone's done it to you. Of course, your point is right.
So we can say that everything is happening for us?
Huh?
Can we say that everything is happening for us instead to us?
Yeah, but to us is a big, big delusion.
Okay, yes.
That's the point. Everything is happening that I set up. It is the result of my actions. We think that in the world every day. We're not surprised by this. If Melody's a good cook, and she's got the recipes, and she's every day doing it wrong, she doesn't go, who's making me cook cakes wrong? She doesn't look for someone to blame, or she might blame her hubby. But she says, what am I doing wrong here? How can I learn from this? We understand this. We're geniuses. If you're doing mathematics, you don't kind of curse Mr. Einstein for writing naughty maths. If you're playing music, you don't abuse Mozart. You notice you're playing the wrong notes. You take responsibility, and now you try to learn the right notes. So we do understand accountability when it comes to these things.
I get this. So can we say that everything then is happening for us?
No, that just doesn't work in English.
Not on
No. I'm the boss is the best one that works in English. You create your own experiences. Your bad habits create bad habits that bring you suffering. If you've been playing that Mozart wrong for so long, the longer you've been playing it wrong, the longer it causes you to play it right. I'm sorry, the longer it takes you to fix it. Isn't it?
Okay, yes.
So we learn from it. We learn from it. Not feeling, who did it to me? It's punishment. It's superstition to think this way, the Buddha would suggest. It's the voice of the victim, and ego is victim. Ego thinks it's all done to me. Experientially, you understand?
Yes.
And I bet Melanie understands that feeling. The one of the victim, badly done by, not fair, poor me. I didn't ask to get born. Who's doing it to me? Where? No one, Buddha says, got egg on your face. You did it to yourself. And all the good. That we have to keep in mind.
Except the case is that it comes from our previous bad karma.
Yeah, it's the same as me, It's just a question of body change.
some-
It's just the same, darling. It's just a question of body changing. Who cares?
No,
This
I mean-
fat old body doesn't matter. That's not the point. It's the mind that's the continuity.
Yeah,
That's the
yes.
Buddha's view.
Yeah,
Of course. That's
but,
me.
But sometimes happens things without have actually created bad things, but they come
What?
from previous lives, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, don't define yourself in terms of which body you've got. You change those every day. Virtually every life you keep changing the body. That's not relevant. I'm talking about the me here as being the continuity of consciousness.
Yeah, but
That's
we
all I'm
don't-
talking.
But we don't come with that memory.
Darling, excuse me, you don't remember even yesterday, so what are you talking about?
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
Well, you don't remember yesterday, it doesn't
What
mean you
you
didn't,
mentioned in
it
a
doesn't
previous
mean you
life.
didn't exist if you don't remember yesterday. You know very well you existed, but you were stupid yesterday and you forgot and didn't do the right thing. So you learn from it, because you are today the continuity of yesterday. Well, you're also the continuity, Buddha says, of the past life. So you take the same kind of ownership. You learn from your mistakes.
Can you know it?
there is no, but it could be some interaction between my karma and other people's karma, right? I'm not alone, and I'm not following only my path. I mean,
Of course it's interacting. We are interdependent.
I mean, other people's karma and how
Of
that
course it
affects
is,
my-
Vasilis. Of
and
course
how
it's like that.
affects their karma, my karma.
Oh, God almighty, you're right. Yes, of course it's all that. Doesn't deny the first point, darling.
So I have to be aware of their karma also.
Yeah, eventually when you're really highly realised, then you will be. Then you've got wisdom, and yes, you can. Buddha says, okay, I have to keep saying Buddha says, because this is what Buddha says. I'm just trying to repeat what he says, That's all. I didn't make it up. I've got to keep giving the right owner to this, Because it's the view I'm buying into. It's the view I'm taking as my hypothesis. So I just repeat it. Do you understand? Not mindlessly, I'm trying to take it on board. So the Buddha would say, we have the potential to develop our consciousness by removing all the pollution from it that enables you to have phenomenal wisdom. to see the past, to see the future, to see the minds of others, and eventually you'll see it. You can even achieve eventually omniscience, which is the quality of God. Omniscience. This is Buddha says it's the natural potential of all minds. I mean, it sounds like an insane thing to say. My Catholic mother was shocked. But this is Buddha's finding. What a Buddha is a person who's got... Okay, I'll describe what you'll be like, Vasilis, when you're enlightened, okay? I'll describe what you'll be like, and it'll all be the same. Your consciousness, which is not physical, will literally pervade wherever there is existence. It can't not be there. It'll be pervading existence, knowing that which exists exactly as it exists without mistake, which includes knowing perfectly the minds of all the trillions of sentient beings, all their past and all their future and all their karma, and you'll have this infinite compassion for every single one as if they were you, because there's no longer any sense of a separate self. You'll have this infinite compassion for everyone and the wish only to help them, and that wisdom informs your ability to know how to help them, and you will have the power to do whatever needs to be done, including manifesting your mind in billions of forms, throughout billions of universes, for billions of eons, for the sake of all the billions of sentient beings. That's a Buddha. So kind of like, don't hold your breath.
They have a long way to that.
Exactly, that's right, precisely. This is what is the Buddha's teachings, you know, this is the, so, you know.
That's why you can't remember.
So, you know, it's like, I say this with a straight face. When I first heard these things, I thought these people were mad, you know. What? It's kind of easy to believe, in a way it's easier to believe there is a being called God who has these qualities, and you can sit there quiet and humble and have faith. That's cool. But this one says you can become it. This one says you can become it. Bloody hell, you know. I remember giving a talk to some Lutherans in Kathmandu one time, and they were really interested in all the differences. And so I was discussing what a Buddha is, or even a bodhisattva, an awake. Buddha's often translated as a fully awake. So bodhisattva, an awakening person on the way to becoming, you know. And I said how they want to be reborn life after life to help others. And he said, oh, I don't want that. That sounds terrible. He said, I want to go to heaven with God when I die, please. So that's okay, but it's different. You know, it's just different view. This is Buddha's teachings. What can I tell you? But you can be a 1% Buddhist, it's okay.
What about the awareness and the yo-yo effect that you were telling us something yesterday, but we didn't talk about it? Like, can we have awareness that goes, like, say, 1-2 levels and then drops again? Can this happen?
Yes, of course, is what I'm saying to Prem. His point about being godly and being in what they call the God realms, which is the peak of samsara, where you're born in this blissful, radiant being in the nature of bliss with a light body for a long time. But if you haven't realized emptiness, as they say, so now I'm going to go into that one and squeeze our brains, and you know, you'll see. So we'll go into this one until we realise the ultimate nature of ourself. And how it does and doesn't exist, which I'll now talk about, it seems the time. Until then, you haven't cut the root of all suffering. You might have lots and lots of bliss for a while, but the petrol tank runs out, and you've still got the sense of self, and you'll have suffering again. Until you've cut the root of the I. This one I'll now talk about. You're going to keep falling back.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that one now. What's your question? Where are you? Yes, darling. What's your question?
You also said that Buddha said, don't believe what I say.
Of course.
Check it.
Absolutely. That's
And
the point.
when you're talking about karma
Yes.
and past life,
Yes, of course.
it,
Not to mention Buddha, excuse me, omniscience.
it's kind of irrelevant for us, like,
Why is that?
because we cannot check it.
Who said
or
you
not.
can't? Let's stop right there. Stop right there. Stop right there and let's discuss. Hold that.
Okay.
Remember I said Buddha was a regular guy,
Yeah.
like you and me,
Yeah.
who did prove it and did check it and did come to the conclusion. So if he can do it, you can do it. He's laid the steps out.
Yeah, I believe.
No, don't believe. No, don't believe. What I'm saying is, if he was a regular guy and he came to these findings, he's either a complete maniac,
Yeah,
or he
it's
didn't.
like 10 stages ahead.
But so what? So what, darling? You're on a long road. That's okay. One step at a time. One step at a time.
I'm just saying that, talking about past life is just stories for us.
Of course
It's
it
like
is.
the story
Okay.
of God
I understand that. So I'll use an analogy. Okay.
with
Okay.
us.
People, it's okay. She's fine. I accept her point. It's okay. She's completely right. I agree with her point. So listen, sweetheart, can I give you an analogy? Just because, okay, first of all, I would suggest you say that. Because we're so used to believing that religion is God, and you're not supposed to check what God said, that would be considered very bad manners. God is necessarily superior. Ran the universe. He runs all the laws, and we need to have faith in him. I think that is a stupendous view. I find that astonishing. If every Jew and Muslim and Christian on this earth had faith, the world would be a very blissful place, I promise. Would it not? You'd all be happy with God because it's God's will. You don't know, you can't work out God's will. Back off, mind your own business. Like a Christian friend of mine said, get out of God's way and let him do his job. I think it's amazing. But that's what we think of religion. So naturally the view, when as soon as you hear about past lives and mysterious things, that we assume it's not provable, isn't it? Which is your point. We assume it. Because at this moment in time, who can see a past life? Okay, so now, let me use an ordinary analogy. I think this is an interesting point. This is how I find this quite helpful. If, let's say, I'm brought up with just allopathic systems of medicine, regular old medicine, the one we use. And then suddenly one day, when I was in Melbourne, as a little girl, I heard about something, I mentioned this briefly, weird, strange people who stick needles in people. Well, initially, I would have been shocked, right? Don't be ridiculous, that's impossible. Even now the medical system thinks acupuncture is ridiculous, all the old-fashioned doctors, isn't it? They're so stubborn in their view. Don't be ridiculous, it's superstition. All the homeopathic superstitious, that's how people talk about it this way. So then, okay, if you've got an open mind, and this is what I'm talking about, being the Buddhist approach too, the first step I have to take is open my mind to the possibility that it could be valid. You'll never investigate it if you don't do that. You've got to have an open mind. So then you've got to have an open mind, and then I would start to investigate acupuncture. Not just go to an acupuncturist and have the treatment, but if I wanted to prove it to myself. Prove it, right? I'd have to learn it, wouldn't I? Would you agree with that? And then I'm either going to find out that it's a load of rubbish or that it's valid. Would you agree with that? Isn't it? So the first step surely has to be intellectual, theoretical, doesn't it? You have to learn the theories, don't you? And I mean, they're quite elaborate theories, wouldn't they be? And my sense is, if a system, whether it's a Buddhist, a system of the world called Buddhism, or a system called Judaism, I don't care what it is, or a system called acupuncture, whatever it is, which has got a bunch of ideas about how things are, the first step has to be theoretical and intellectual. It has to be this way. You've got to have the views, before you even make a cake, you've got to have a proper theory. Then you can make the cake. Before you do anything, you've got to have a proper theory, and then you can prove it to be true, or not. So you've got to go one step at a time. So my sense is you can learn the theories of acupuncture, and if, this is the point, if acupuncture is valid, first, before you stick a needle in anybody, you could prove it theoretically. It would have to be theoretically coherent. Same here. So you don't rush ahead of yourself. Clairvoyance, the ability which you gain through single-pointed concentration, this technique the Hindus invented, this is all there available to us. And when you've got single-pointed concentration at a subtle level of your mind, you necessarily can see the past and future. You will then prove to yourself reincarnation, so they say. But one step at a time, You've got to take it on board according to your level. And that's all I keep saying that I'm trying to do, studying Buddhism, theories, the concepts, the principles, the philosophy, and then attempting to practice according to my own level. I can't do more than that. It's impossible, So I'm taking on board the whole caboodle. I'm taking on board as my working hypothesis the Buddhist view of the universe. I'm content to do that. I've chosen to do that. But so, in other words, I'm prepared to find Buddha wrong. Because as the Dalai Lama says, if you do the steps that he says, and you do prove that it doesn't work, then he is wrong and you must reject him. So I'm taking it one small step at a time. I'm prepared to talk about hells, universes, but I want to understand it theoretically first. I find that all very powerful already. I'm content with that. No hurry. Slowly, slowly. Slowly, slowly. I'll go at my own pace. I'm very happy with that. I have no problem with opening my mind to the possibility of hells, God realms, all these things we're discussing in this room. Do you see what my point is? Yeah. So it's kind of, one step at a time. One step at a time. And for me, it's not. It's why I always consciously never say I believe in it, because I think we can tend towards intellectual laziness. We tend to sort of go shopping and we believe the things we like the sound of, but we mightn't believe the things we don't like the sound of. Like Christians these days. Oh, I don't like hell. There's no hell. They say goodbye. There's no hell. But if they look at Christian teachings properly, the big picture, and the Jewish ones, and the Muslim ones, they all talk about the same thing. It's kind of interesting. Do you understand my point? Yeah. And then I really like the way to try and bring it on the earth. Try and talk about it experientially, and try and talk about it practically, and try and make it sensitive, not sort of high, falutin stuff. And I might be all a load of rubbish, but so far all I can say is I can be confident that I said before, even taking on board theoretically the view of karma and reincarnation, I can see already there's no question for myself, less anger, less blame, more, that kind of thing I've been talking. That I can say is tasty for me. Even just theoretically taking it. I can't prove it yet, I haven't got clairvoyance. But theoretically I'm taking it on board as my way of seeing the world. Do you see what I'm saying? And I think every one of us has the right and the responsibility. We don't have to, but I think it's fascinating. We all have these questions. We're serious in our life. We all ask why, what, who am I, where's it all come from? So we ought to have the courage to look at all these different views and then work with the one that works for you and then not dump it down on other people, you know? Because we each have the right and the responsibility to think what we think, do what we do. Do you understand the bigger picture, the big approach? Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to squeeze our brains and we're going to talk about this one. This is the ultimate view, the final view in the Buddhist view of understanding is understanding the nature of self, about how this self exists. This is all these teachings in a way in Buddhist structure, they lead to this point. They lead to this understanding that the Buddha has, again, coming from his own experiences where he diverged from the Hindus. It's all in relation to what the self is, finally, in its essence, who we really are. And this is not necessarily how we talk, you know. So, I mean, I'll say these things and see if we can just have a bit of a conversation about it. Okay, so first of all, we've got to go, the more we understand this Buddhist model of the mind, how we've got these neurotic states of mind that in their nature are delusional and disturbing, but their particular characteristic is that they're misconceptions. Misconceptions. The extent to which I'm caught up in any one of these neuroses is the extent to which, one, I'm very disturbed and freaked out, and two, is the extent to which I'm not in touch with reality or with truth or with the facts of how things exist. This is very much the way Buddha talks, okay? So, the root delusion, as they call it, and this is the one that I've referred to quite a bit as ego grasping, like the mother of them all, the one that underpins all the others. In other words, there's the root sense, this primordial mistaken sense, Buddha says, I'll try and explain, of I, this primordial fundamental sense of I. He says it's deep in our bones, but we have a misconception about it. This is the root of all suffering. And on the basis of this very profound sense of a separate self, lonely, bereft, fear-based, it gives rise to this massive neediness, attachment to get what that assumed I wants, which then gives rise to anger when it doesn't get what it wants, which gives rise to the jealousy and all the other dramas. This is what Buddha means by being in samsara, being caught up in these terrible, painful states of mind that lead us up garden paths, that confuse us, that cause us to do neurotic things, harm others, and then perpetuate our own suffering. This is how he talks. So the work we have to do, first control our body and speech, junior school. You go to high school, you learn to understand how to meditate, you get your focus, you learn the model of the mind, understand these neuroses, and learn this amazing job of initially, like distinguishing between all the good bits of me, virtue, the love, the kindness, the compassion, the wisdom, the clarity, the fearlessness, the confidence, and all the other painful stuff that breaks our hearts and drags us down and causes us to be miserable and to harm others. We've got to distinguish. So the more clear we are at this, we can continue then on the compassion wing to continue to lessen the delusions and grow our courageous relationship with others, break down the barriers between self and others. And then finally what we have to do is finally uproot from our mind the deepest delusion, this ego grasping, this primordial one. And when we've done this, from the first second of seeing this one, and I'll explain, then we climb out of samsara and begin. We can't fall back after this. This is what we haven't done before, the Buddha would suggest. So let's try and talk about this one then. So the words they use, and this is the trouble with the words, because they're coming from Tibet, because they're coming from India, and all the lineages, in any system that you learn, you know yourself if you study Judaism, but all this language that people use, if you first heard it, you would never clue what they're talking about. Every system has its own language, its own way of talking. Look at mathematics, it's so confusing. You have to learn all these new definitions. Every system's like that. So Buddhism has its own way of talking, So, okay, the terms, there's one really nice way of framing reality, as he talks about. This is a really big deal for the Buddha. Because he's saying, remember, the neuroses cause us to be not seeing reality. They project their own nonsense onto things, and they're all neurotic, I-based, which is why they cause so much pain. So, There's one really nice way of framing this discussion of how things exist. And that's, they refer to it as the two truths: conventional truth and ultimate truth. So these words are normal words, but they're used so specifically, of course, in this system. So basically what the Buddha is saying is the universe, just in a conventional sense, as we can see, consists of billions and billions of different phenomena, you know? So if we want to communicate even conventionally, if I'm going to say, please pass the cup, we'd all better be on the same page, hadn't we, about what a cup is. So that means, you know, my little girl, oh, Mummy, what's a cup, darling? Mummy, what's a cup? Well, sweetheart, it's this little, she'll give you a definition of a cup. It's got two parts. The first part tells you its conventional characteristics. Well, sweetie, it's that flat-bottomed little container over there, round, you know, with blue on it and made of clay. That tells you it's the first part, its conventional characteristics. But then I say, but what does it do? Oh, honey, it holds my tea. Well, you know, that's not enough to believe it's a cup yet. Who says, I might say? Well, let's get the tea, and let's pour the tea, and we prove it holds the tea. It fits its definition. And then we make sure there's no other valid cognitions that argue with that. And we can all tick the box, we can all sign the contract, we can all now talk about cups, because we've all accepted the convention of a cup. Everything Buddha says exists like that. Our mind names it, defines it, it fulfills that function, and then we all can communicate. And we don't have wars about, please pass me the cup, but you think it's a knife, and I'll say I haven't got a cup, and you'll say you're lying, you have, and I'll think it's a knife. We're in big trouble. No, we all agree. Cups and toilets and microphones, and we can do, and it's what we call science. It's just knowing what things are and communicating. Now, one of those types of phenomena in this universe is called a person. We can see the world is made of many persons. Person, or I, or self, they're synonymous in Buddhism. That refers to any mind possessor. That refers to ants and dogs and hell beings and hungry ghosts. But let's just never mind that. Let's just talk about the persons we can see in this room. Human persons. So the name of this phenomenon is couch. The name of that is a teapot. That's a bottle. That's a cup. That's a satchel. That's a plant. This is a person. Conventionally. No problems. We all accept that. I'm a person. There's a person. You're a person. Or self. Or I. They're persons, they all mean the same. So what Buddha's saying is, about everything that exists, but in particular, let's talk about the phenomenon called I, or self, or person. He says we've got it wrong, fundamentally, about how it exists. He says, and there's different ways of talking about this, but one of the tasty ways, he says that we really believe in the bones of our being, that in there somewhere, there's like a little mini-me that runs the show. And our language completely expresses this. I did that. You did that to me. I am beautiful. I am depressed. I have this. I do that. I, the word I, as we can see, is the central player. Everything's in reference to I. Attachment is the expression of what I wants. Anger is the expression of when it doesn't get what it wants. Every delusion, all the way we act right now, is all on the assumption of this independent, separate little I in there that's sort of like the boss, like the puppeteer, like the landlord or something. So even as we say these words, we're feeling, well, yes, you're right. There is an I in there somewhere. This is me, you know. There's an I. And so, this is the stuff that the Hindus dealt with. It was unbelievable, these great yogis, what they came up with. Phenomenal findings from the depths of their own amazing meditations. Incredible findings, all the different views in Hinduism. Buddha came out of that and then he went in his own direction, you know, because he came to his own conclusions about how exactly this I exists. Like I was with the Dalai Lama, I was reading recently, he said it was the Hindus more than 3,000 years ago who began this discussion about the nature of self. So you can argue the Jews and the Christians also, but they call it a soul. They posit a creator who gives you a soul, you know? So soul or atma, self, the similar idea. Philosophically, the actual way it is existing. So Buddha's discussion, and this is the stuff that, they study all this stuff for 30 years in the monasteries, and then they go off to meditate for another 30 to try and get it, you know? So please, one step at a time. Not to mention 30 lives. So what Buddha's basically saying, the words for it, the simple words for it, and we'll try and unpack this now, is it, Robina, darling? Once you start to search, he is saying to me, okay, Robina, you won't find that I in there. There is no I in there that you think there is. There isn't a little separate, individual, independent little I in there that runs the show. Even though I totally and utterly and completely and primordially and instinctively and have for eons, he says, believed there is. And he says the primordial belief in that definite, solid, independent I is the cause of all suffering. So it's the elimination, not of that I, because it doesn't exist, but of the belief in it that is the beginning of the end of suffering, he says. So this, this is a huge point, this one. Massive, and it seems so esoteric to us. And the words that he used seem so confusing. So if you want to talk about the words they use, so if we look at how things exist conventionally, the shorthand for this is dependent arising, interdependence. Conventionally speaking, everything exists interdependently, but they talk about it in very specific ways here. So one way of describing that, conventionally speaking, the conventional phenomenon called I is a term we use to refer to, this I exists in dependence upon its parts. That everything that exists is made up of bits and pieces. Bits and pieces, the parts, And then ultimately, he's saying, among those parts, here, among these parts, you will not find even an atom of anything that you can label I. So that's called, the shorthand for that's called emptiness. So the second we hear that, Buddha would say, there is no I from its own side. These are the terms they use. There is no I inherently. There is no I intrinsically. There is no I in and of itself. There is no I ultimately. So the millisecond we hear there is no I, we go, oh, well, there's no self. I might as well go kill myself. And we sort of chuck the baby out with the bathwater and become nihilistic. He says, you just chucked the baby out with the bathwater. You went too far. And then as soon as we hear conventional reality, that there is an I that does exist in dependence upon the parts, etc., we'll go, oh, thank God there is something. Grasp. What a relief. There's something after all. The Buddha says that's also an exaggeration. He says these are the two extremes we go between all the time. We over-exaggerate, we reify the sense of I. There is an I there, a little precious little I in there. Or as soon as we hear about emptiness, we think there's no I. And it's not like this. It's incredibly much more subtle than this and more nuanced than this, they say. So the key thing then, Buddha says, we have to look for, it sounds hilarious, to look for the I that we believe is there. It sounds so ridiculous, So of course this implies understanding what that means. You learn about what causes, affect, the parts. You learn all the bits and pieces that lead up to this. But it's like, so first of all, when we hear this, it seems like, what are you talking about? There's no I. It's so assumed. But the Buddha's basically saying, there is an I, but not the way we think there is. And when we hear this, it sort of like says there's a right I and there's a wrong I. And the belief in the wrong one is the cause of all the suffering. Because we grasp primordially, When you insult me, I did not do that. Who are you to insult me like that? When someone really hurts you, with the offence, the pain. So attachment, anger, and all the rest are the voices of this assumed I. And that's why they say when you finally realise, as they say it, the emptiness of this I, the absence of this I, then attachment and anger and pride and fear just fall away. There's no basis for them any longer. But so it's clearly an incredibly subtle point. Like I said, they study this stuff for 30 years, then go meditate for another 30 to get it in the depths of their subtle concentration, to unpack this. Are we communicating here?
Yes.
So there's lots of little examples. It sounds so strange, but let's do just, like, we'll go, let's say, okay, we'll do some. One way of putting this is, Buddha's sort of saying, well, listen, Robina, honey, you don't need this extra little piece called an I. You don't need a piece called an I. It's an unnecessary embellishment. You don't need it. All the parts do beautifully on their own. So in other words, I use the analogy, like a lot, I just said before, of my roommates. Anger, love, jealousy, kindness, all the 47 variations of everyone all running around in my head, So the assumption is, when I say I'm angry, there's an assumption that one of the roommates is called I, like the landlord, isn't it? We have an assumption. You're like the owner, the boss. There's a landlord there. Well, in a sense, Buddha's saying you don't need a landlord. That's why you don't need a creator. That's why you don't need an I to run the show. You don't need it, because the parts do nicely on their own. So just little examples. I'll use one. See if we can go into this and do a bit of analysis to try and see the point. Okay. So what would you call this action that I'm doing just here? What's a sentence to say this action I'm doing?
Holding a teapot.
Yeah, Robina's holding a teapot, isn't she? It's a conventional statement of truth. We know Robina refers to this person. We know is holding, we know what that means, we've learned English, and we know teapot. So then you put all that together and you have a valid statement, a conventional truth. Robina is holding a teapot. Yeah? So that's a correct statement. You can't argue with it. But let's analyse that, because what Buddha's saying is the assumption in the mind is that there is a little inherent, independent little Robina in there who is running it and making the thinker, the doer, the person who's making me hold the teapot. You understand? So Buddha says, so let's look at this and see if we can find that one, to see if we need that one. So let's analyse, break that down. What part of Robina is holding a teapot?
Her hand.
Huh?
Her hand.
Her right hand. So what hand? Her right hand. Which part of her right hand?
Fingers.
And which part of her fingers? You kind of get my point. You keep analysing. If you had to write like instructions of how to hold a teapot, you'd have to have 1,000 instructions there. The finger does this, and the joint. You've got the joints. You have the fingers. You have the ligaments. You have the muscles. You have the nerves. You have the skin. There's a million. You probably have 1,000 pieces, all working beautifully, isn't it? To do this this spontaneous thing, because I haven't forgotten how to do it. You imagine having to learn to do it again. You have to exercise every one. So you'd have a long list of all the parts, wouldn't you? All the parts of the hand, then the muscles up here, and then the elbow, and the hand, and all the bits are up here, and then here. There's a million pieces. No, I know you do this. Can you just listen? Thank you. Your busy, busy mind. I love you. Yes, it is. Please listen. I beg you. Take it one step at a time.
Yeah, I have a question on that.
Which bit? About the hand?
About who's holding the
I know, but I haven't finished. I've got to finish the proposition first, then we can discuss it. I know I'm running the show here. I am running the show here. I know that. But let me finish it, then it's going to be discussion. That's my point. We will have it, I promise. So, okay. Now, we all know if this was a dead body, it wouldn't be holding a cup, would it? A teapot, would it? So we clearly know the real player is the mind, isn't it? That's clear. So now let's analyse, because if we think there is a little self, we usually think it's in the mind. This is reasonable. So let's look at the pieces of our mind that are playing their role in the action called Robina's holding a teapot. So not using the brain, but using the Buddhist view of all these millions of thoughts. Just like the millions of parts of the hand, the mind has millions of parts also. So the crucial first one, which is the meaning of karma, is the thought, I will hold the teapot. That's the first one. That's intention. That's a basic. Then you've got to have attention, which pays attention to make it happen. Then you have to have mindfulness, which is this ability to remember what you're doing, so you don't drop the teapot. Then there's there's one called vigilance. It's watching, mindfulness, watching this. All these bits of your mind that are all, like the hand, all working perfectly, right? To bring the total experience labelled Robina is holding a teapot. So far, have you noticed, I haven't pinpointed any part called I. All we've done is look at the parts of the I, haven't we? Can you see what I'm saying? So then, if we have managed so far to describe all the parts that are working, mind and body, why would you want another part called I? Because you don't need a piece called I. Instinctively we think there is. We almost don't think we think that. But we assume there has to be an I who's running the show. We assume an I decides to hold the teapot. No, intention holds the teapot. It decides. Which part helps intention? Attention. And then this one. There's not a piece, in other words, there's not a piece called I walking hand in hand with attention, intention, thumb, ligament, muscle, and all the other millions of parts that make up what we label Robina. So now, Vasilis, what is your discussion? What is your question here in relation to this?
Yeah.
And the point of this exercise is to see if you can locate a piece called I that's running the show. That's the exercise.
Yeah. The question is that who initiates the intention?
That's my point to you. You are exactly. I knew you'd say that. And that's perfect. It's correct. We all do. There's an assumption in your mind that there has to be an I who decides to hold the teapot.
No.
You just asked it.
No, I said who. I didn't say I.
You just no. Hey. You just pointed out who means I. You assume. This is my point. This is the point that Buddha's making. You immediately assumed there is a part in there somewhere, a person or something that decided to hold. That's called intention.
No, who initiates?
I know your question perfectly, but there isn't anything. Intention initiates it. You don't need an I to initiate it. There isn't one. Intention initiates it. That's the point, honey. You just hit the nail on the head. You think there's an I.
So who's responsible at the end for the karma?
Rabina.
Who's Robina?
Rabina is the name given to all those parts.
I mean, if
Vasilis! Vasilis is the name, merely the name, given to all these parts. It's like smoke and mirrors. This is the conclusion you come to when you realize emptiness. That Vasilis is merely a name that we use to impute upon the parts. But among those parts, there is no such thing as Vasilis. That's the thing. That's the conclusion. That's the conclusion we come to. That's the point. But your question is perfect. It assumes there is an I who decided to hold. That's what we think about every millisecond of what we do. There's an I that's angry. There's an I that's jealous. There's an I that sleeps. There's an I that's awake. There's an I that's fat. There's an I that decides. There's an I watching my breath. There's an I watching everything. That's the point. That's the point. That's the point. And Buddha says that one you will not find because it doesn't exist.
So what's the self?
Self is the same word as the I.
Yeah.
The same word as the I. So
the recipient of the karma, I don't understand then.
I know that.
My head.
No, karma.
My head. What?
No, your consciousness. One part of you is called consciousness. A person's made of body and mind, and the part that holds the karmic imprints, because that is, if you want to, between the body and the mind is the boss for sure. Between body and mind, which are the parts that we label. This bunch over here, we label this combination of parts Vasilis. Okay? So the mind is holding every single millisecond, every thought, every intention, every action the mind does, that it imprints in itself. So the karma is played out in the mind, in the consciousness. And then when Vasilis' body disappears and turns into dust and the consciousness leaves, it carries on with all those imprints. That Vasilis did, and the cat did, and the dog did, and the holy being did, how many lives, you know? So consciousness is what holds the karma. Yeah, go. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, like I said, you know, this is the Hindus, these amazing Hindus 3,000 years ago did all this information, and then Buddha comes out of this and goes on into another direction, you know. So and all the religions, all the thinkers, all the scientists, this is what they're talking about. So it's a huge and massive and marvellous topic, you know. And the Buddha's saying, as Opa says, when you've realised emptiness, and I want to go into this word now because it's so confusing if we read it in the teachings, and when we've realised emptiness, meaning when the penny has dropped and we've finally seen clearly, crystal clearly, that I that I think has been running the show for eons isn't there. Realising that, from that second, he said, you can't fall back, and from that second, fear begins to go. Because it's the believing in this fantasy I, which gives rise to attachment, anger, and all the rest, is the source of all fear. Fear is its main energy. You know?
And who is realizing this?
Sorry?
And who is realizing this? Who has up to now an illusion, and who is realizing
Vasilis is realizing it. Vasilis is the name we give just to communicate with this package over there. That's all. It's just a name. There's no Vasilis in there. There's no inherent Vasilis. So we'll speak comfortably. Vasilis is sitting on a cushion. It's just communication. So Vasilis had realizations. Vasilis did that. Vasilis is my boyfriend. Whatever. But you won't find that Vasilis. So it's sort of like, as Lama Zopa says, when you've realized the emptiness of the independent, real, solid, frozen in space fantasy I that we think is there, when you realise the emptiness of that, he says it's as if there's no I, but there is. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it is an illusion. That's how they talk. That's not meant to be some hippy-trippy statement. That's said to be profoundly the experience of somebody. So it's kind of interesting stuff, subtle stuff. It's time for tea, I think. Sorry, need time to go home. Oh, it's time for tea.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
I think, I don't know, half an hour is good. Absorb the emptiness teaching for half an hour. Try and drink tea which is empty. Empty you drinking empty tea. We haven't got to the word emptiness yet, which is implied by all this, and I'll go into this later. Thank you, darlings.
Thank you. Thank you.